So this is a shir in Sefer Maamarim Tov Reish Mem Zayin, in the Sefer Klorif and Tov Reish Mem Bava Tov Reish Nun, and we are learning the Maamar of Zocher Eisha Salcha Molek B'Shnas Tov Reish Mem Zayin, and that's on. We're holding at the moment on the Omud Pei Daled in the printed Sefer. Wait a minute, we're holding already on Pei Hey, about a third of the way down the page, or just a little more. And tonight is Tuesday night, Oyer Pli Lamed Shvat Yom Aleph Rosh Chodesh Order Tovshin Ayin Base. Alright, so we're holding that we saw that it was a Iker Godel that there should be the union from Chayes in Maisa Mitzvahs, and that the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya and Perek Daled that life force and enthusiasm, Chayes, in keeping of the mitzvahs, but that's from the arousal in the soul of Ava V'Yira, a davke that they should be Ava V'Yira Murgoshes. You should feel them davke in the midas Shebelev B'Pashtas. And then we saw that there's a union that the moichin should continue being Meir into the midas after the midas already been Neilad, and that's a separate union of guarding the midah from Achizal Chitzonim, because since a midah is a inifan hargosha begolui, and it's a revealed emotional arousal in the mensch, it can be possibilities of yanika l'chitzonim mizeh. Therefore, you have to have, or it's good to have the ha'oras hamoichin b'toich hamidas even after they've grown. However, we saw that the ikar in all this, in the giving birth to the midas believe they should be midas margoshes davki in the leiv agashmiya, the ikar in that was the koach hadas, and we saw that was the union of the das taktim. We mentioned earlier that there was das elyon and das taktim in the Adam himself, and das elyon was the ischabres chokma and bina alidei koach hadas, ve'ilu das taktim, well, that's the makasher, and the dover hammer, the koyach hamakasher, the bechinas hamoichin be midas. It brings down the oilam hamoichin into the midas, and we discussed at some length. The moichin and the midas are two different worlds altogether, two different states, and davke through the amshocha or the moichin into the midas, or that's the shleimus gilui of the midas by the mensch, and that's the ikar, to join together of those two separate worlds, and to bring the detachment of the moichin into the midas. Well, that needs even a koyach, which is mamish. It shows to the Adam and indicates to him how the hisbonin is nogeya to him, how it's really important to him as a living in emotion, and that's a koach hadas. Dainu kishem is beinin b'siklei b'ezi hisbonin is poel b'libei hisbonin azu. We thought he gets aroused davki from the hisboninas. But like Moshe Choshev is a dover, and not that he should be like a person who just thinks of some meaning which is not really nagir to him, nagir meaning meaningful and important to him. It should be important to his heart, and also the word yagir can mean to reach his heart, should come into the heart. And we saw that in the Inifan Gash, and then we began bringing a whole moshel in Gashmis or Olam in reference to that, and we saw that there can be Ava V'Yira also in Gashmias, where a mensch loves a dover which he knows to be good for him, or he's afraid of a thing which is going to be mazik him, and that's also through the koach hadas. Although it's not kol kach in avodas Hashem, but it's in the koach hanefesh, a union of commitment and recognition almost, and an of seeing the emeskite and the necessity of that Indian who Indian hagoshes atzmios yeshamagish nafshe, and that's the Indian what a man feels himself, and he's very intensely aware of his own self and the importance of that particular Indian to his self. And we brought down in Yiddish that Herr von sich sehr stark, and then we saw that we modified that somewhat what it means by and then he went on to say that that's the Indian von Avos Atzmei. However, not to be misled by that completely, the Avos Atzmei committee just Tameh sich and the Indian von Yeshes, and although and therefore he feels himself, he's aware of himself, and he wants that thing for himself because he's deeply aware of himself and he feels himself, but that could be misleading. And therefore he said, Kol Masha Mevin B'Siklei Shatoivlei, that when he understands and he's seichel that thing is a good thing for him, then he knows that Ali Deizeh, is Pashtas Achayis. In other words, that Indian that he wants will in some way contribute to the spreading of the chayas of the nefesh in his body. Something which will prevent the spreading out of the life force of the nefesh into his body. Somebody who's not aware of himself or doesn't feel himself so deeply, even though he understands in seichel, nonetheless he's not mispoil so much of a chibi yisera. He doesn't really feel a special or extra of affection that particular inyan. And so once again we see this surprising expression that he doesn't feel himself so much. I mean, every individual feels himself. What do I mean he doesn't feel himself so much? So we have to say, and that's what he goes on now to develop, the Rebbe, that about everybody feels themselves, but it depends in what way. If you're aware of the nefesh and the importance of the nefesh, and it shaykhs to everything that is good and proper is through the inyan of the nefesh. So first of all, you want these pashtas of the nefesh in your body. You're very anxious that there shouldn't be anything disturbed, the spreading out of the chayas of the nefesh in your body. And furthermore, you're misbeinen about each particular matter in life, whether that's a dover which is going to bring advantage to his nefesh and mamera to the spreading of the nefesh in the body, or whether it's going to be a dover hamazik to that chayah. And what is what we mean by that he's magish yisatzmei. Not that he just feels himself in a material and yeshestika way, but he feels the nefesh, what is good for that nefesh, and what will add to the spreading of the chayas of the nefesh beklal in his guf. We'll see even further, maybe even into the inyan of the world in general. So therefore he said, "Be emes b'misha magish yisatzmei b'choizek." When somebody feels himself very strongly, the reason why he feels that matter so strongly is because he's got a hakora, he's got like a recognition. He's come to a pneumistic feeling and yediyah. Hakora means a very deep type of awareness or knowledge of something. That when he feels himself, meaning the chayas of the nefesh and the benefits of the chayas of nefesh, and how that's a good thing basically for him, and he feels now that this particular thing is good for that nefesh and for the spashus of the nefesh, then he comes through that reflection and through that thinking himself deeply into that inyan, he comes to a form of what's called hakora. And hakora means like he sees the pneumistic significance of that, not just that it's a good thing, but he sees the emes and the etzem of the zach. And just like you makir somebody, you know you haven't seen him in a long time and you might have even forgotten about him, but all of a sudden you know that that's him, because you see an essential light in that person that you remember from before. Remember, you kill back to the whole relation that you have with him. So that's what he means by the word hakora. You come to the realization in a pneumistic, very, very summing up type of way that dover who's to you, and when you like that, then it's in another way altogether. You feel that the thing is good for you. Mitoich hakora, it's in another way altogether, meaning with another strength and another excitement and devotion to that in you. And somebody who's not particularly so concerned about the whole kesher of the nefesh with his good and with the relationship of his nefesh to the world, so it doesn't really bother him so much. He may be bothered by other more material and gashmistic azach. So therefore he says, Dahainu as shemavin b'siklei shadova teiv nisamis. That's become very emis by him. That is bonanus ba'akora v'hargosha, in this recognition and a feeling for it. Like we point out, the das is the koyach in the moyach to feel something, and therefore das is divided into chesed and gvura, and they divided. It's koil in itself, chesed and gvura, because it's a union of hergesh, of feeling and sensitivity inside the moyach itself. That's the union van dat. Somebody who has really busied himself to understand properly through his bonanus how that thing is good and how it's a worthy thing for him and for his nefesh, which is tremendously important and felt by him, then he has a tremendously different, another way altogether of understanding how that thing is good, because he sees it and recognizes it, and he sees the whole thing in its pneumius and what you might call its entirety. And therefore he says, one is dependent in the other. In other words, the fact that he sees that it's become hakora v'hargosha etzloi, that's because it became nisamas etzloi ba'akora. Since his bonanus brought him to an emes type of his bonanus, and he reached hakora, well, therefore he comes to a hargosha, and therefore he feels ava. So he says, v'ho b'ho talia, the ava is totally in the fact that he had this hakora v'hargosha inside the moya. In other words, that the ava came because he had the hakora and the hargosha inside the moya with that stars, and therefore they depend one on the other. Or mokke lakolze, he said, and all of this is hargoshas, the feelingness and the sensitivity of atzmusay, of the feeling in itself. But like we said, not feeling in itself in a grober even, or not good or even. That's true that he was concerned with these nefesh, the hargoshas atzmusay al yidei, aishkashus pechoizek, that he bound himself up very strongly, lakshav ulahara bazeh, and to think about it and to continuously reflect on it. Laharel means to reflect on it all the time, and through that, well, that causes those inyonim of hakora v'hargosha, and that causes the union of ultimately of ava in the lay. So we see then that here the Rebbe seems to be saying pretty clearly that the immediate union of das being the hakora and the hargosha in the moyach, the power of feeling inside the moyach, the chesed gvura, the betoich hamoyach, well, that comes on the day what you bind yourself over to it. That would tend to be the pshat, like we discussed the other day in Tanya, that it could apply, it could imply maybe two different lefanim. But here it would tend to imply that the Rebbe is learning that you come to this hakora, this hargosha, through the iskashas, through being bound over. Because there in town it's a little bit much more the das is the etzem iskashas. And here we imply that you get to the hakora, hargosha, and mamela, to the ava, what they bring, al yidei, what you will makasha yourself to it. That's what he says. Al yidei, hu hargosha atzmei, al yidei iskashas pechoizek, that he binds himself over. And in Tanya, it's much more that he's saying that is the das, the iskashus, but that is the das. So therefore we have to say that it can work in different ways. That some people can be gifted with the union of das, and das leads by them to iskashus more and more into the union. And some people have to first of all be miskasher in the union very strongly, and that leads them to das. And then they come to a result of these bonds in the form of hakora, and that leads to the feeling in the brain, and that leads eventually to the midah shabalei. So we have to say that there the pshat is that bound you up. Why were you bound up to it? You got through that hakora v'haragosha. So it's like I suggested the other day in Tanya, we have to say that there's a rotzen hanefesh for everything which is good ultimately according to rotzen Hashem. Then the mensch wants that. So some people would first of all have to bind their rotzen over, almost like Kabbalah soil. They have to bind their will over it to not let the thing go, to be at it and to continually reflect and think, and then they sort of get the Korah Varagosha, and then automatically they're not going to let it go, but it also produces or helps to produce the Ava Shebalev, the Ava Murgoshes, or Murgeshes Balev. Some people, we have to say that they have a natural sort of koyach. When I say natural, I mean a koyach hadas, which is kilo strong mitzad the hashgacha of Hashem. They're sort of into feeling and seeing and recognizing deeply in a thing through kilo his bonus, and that leads. I mean, that's where his bonus below, but their bonus automatically leads her, and that causes them the das and the hakora of Argosha. Well, that causes them to be always bound up to it. And here it's much the other way around it. Through the binding up, then you get to the hakora. So the question would be, what made you bind up? What was so special that you bound yourself? So that's why I said we have to say mitzad rotzah, mitzad devotion to the closest idea of rotzah Hashem. That's what Hashem wants. So therefore you devote yourself to the union of Yisrael Samidas. By bounding yourself up to it, that's a factor in das, albeit it's not the etzem definitional union of das, but it's a factor. Okamai kain yuvan ba'nimsho ba'veda. That was just talking in the simple things of the world, that sometimes you can come to recognize and appreciate something in a very deep way, which will lead you to have ava for it. But he said in the inyan avedas Hashem, she'inyan adas hu ais kashrus be'ais bonanas b'choizek daite. That's the kashrus in the bonanas, b'choizek daite. Like he just said, that you bind yourself over to the reflection strongly, b'choizek, with your das. Until you reach this level of hakora v'agosha, recognition and feeling. But that here seems to be like the result of das, which comes by hemshech to the actual hard work. And in Eter, another place like that, it's much a little bit the other way, but anyway. It's like between hakora v'agosha. Hu chai achayim baruch hu. What's he been misbeinin about, and what's he been so kusha that it should bring him to recognition? He's been thinking the whole time about the Ein Sof, the unlimited giluim of the Eibishter, but in this particular case, how he's Chayei HaChayim. He's the source of all life. Chayei HaChayim means he's not just Chayim, but he's the source of all the Chayim. He's Chayei HaChayim. And it's like it's written in the Torah near the end of Sefer Dvarim. It's written in Pasha Netzovim. That you love the Eibishter because you know that he's your whole life. That without Elikus there's no Chaim. You know that the Eibishter is the Mokir and he's the source of all the Chaim, and therefore you love him and you're devoted to him. That which is Machaya, the world, is the divine light. Pashit, Bo'elam Begilui. So, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. Machayas O'elam, Ubchinas Eira Elaki, Amis Pashit, Bo'elam Lahach Yosei. Ubilodei, Ein Lahem Shum Kiyum, Umetzius Klau. Afilu Rega Achar. Without that, all the creations, all the elements and everything that there is in them, without the Elaki, they don't have any Kiyum, Kiyum meaning continued existence, and they don't have any highest Beklau. At the far, he comes to understand, no, he just like him, that the Abish is his highest. No, the Abish is the highest of the whole universe, the whole creation. Ubilodei, Ein Lahem Shum Kiyum Matias Klau Afil Achas Ulazais. And due to that, Yirtze, he would want Vayakpoitz Ma'id. Now, Yirtze means in a general way to want. Yakpoitz Ma'id is a Pnimius Rotten, a Rotten Pnimi. Beispashtes Hachayes. He would like to see the spreading out of the divine life force in a way that it's in full revelation and full Gilui. Yeah, Chayes. Ubchinas Elaki, she is passionate, Bo'elam Begilui. In other words, he becomes so devoted to the Oyer and to the fact that it's his life, and it's the life of everything, that he wants that the whole world should see it Begolui. And he wants to see it himself Begolui, and he wants it should be a clear and obvious thing to everybody that the Abish is the Chai HaChayim. And therefore he longs for Elikus Begolui. And he can't stand the Indian of Helenba Esther. Ve'ikar ha'amshoches ha'oyer ha'leki v'alidei kiyum mitzvahs asay. Oh, so he thinks to himself, how am I going to do that? How am I going to bring the oyer ha'leki begolei? What is my Indian that I can do to make the oyer ha'leki appear in revelation to everybody? And they should have the same recognition and devotion to the Oyer Laki that I have. And he said the answer to that is Alidei Kiyum Mitzvahs Asay, that if he give himself away to keeping the positive commandments, Ukiyadu the Mitzvahs Asay, that's a slight misprint, that means Mitzvahs Asay. Haim Hamshoches Milmailala, not the positive commandments we do are bringing down the Oyer Laki into the world. When you do a mitzvah like Hanochas Tefillin or Achilas Matzah, all the mitzvahs I say, it's like you make a kli that there should be a gilui oyer into the world. It's like doing something, and doing something is like making a Matthias, an entity, and into that entity is Yered Mispashet, a Meir light. Through keeping the mitzvahs I say, he makes a possibility and a way and a series of kalim through which the Oyer Ein Sof should be misgale into the world mil mailala mater. And together with that, v'yiro v'yifachet v'yispachet, and he will he'll have fear and dread me'adover hamazik lagile Oyer, and he will be upset about things. I want to keep away from them, not anything to, not in any way to reduce them or to assist them, anything which will be mazik to the gil, it'll prevent or damage the gilui oyer ain't safe. V'heim mitzvahs, loisas, and those all the mitzvahs. And if he'll keep away from the mitzvahs loisas, b'tachlis ahidur, because you know that if you're over a mitzvahs loisas, then you damage. You push away the gilui, which he wants so much. He wants so much that everybody see the gilui and that's his whole love of Hashem is expressed that way. And therefore he does the mitzvahs I say with a tremendous enthusiasm, and he does the mitzvahs loisa I say with a fear. When there's a genuine fear that he doesn't want to in any way impinge on the gilui elikus. Because there. And all that is through the koach of das, shu ais kashrus, v'kesher amitz v'chozach. That's the being bound over with a tremendously strong and powerful knot, Ad shenis amis etzloi, until it's become emes, the Indian of Elakus, and Gil Elakus has become so truthful. Ad shenis amis, that's a verb from the word emes, meaning it has become truthfulized, or become true. Etzloi by him, bechinas hakora ve'agosha, until he has a pneumistic recognition and a feeling, an awakening of feeling for that particular Indian which is here, Gil Elakus. Through that is born into his soul the Indian of love of Hashem and fear of Hashem. Shahem Mokeh HaRamach Mitzvahs Asay. Well, that one makes him do all the mitzvahs Asay. V'shasar mitzvahs, and that's the yira and the pachad. Well, that's a mokeh for keeping all the negative commandments. That's the picture of how it goes through the whole Seder of Aveda. If we reckon out the koiches and everything, they're interrelation one to the other. How is he from these bon and Shabbat? How does he reach Midas Shabbat? So we see it goes through a whole series of stages. So first of all, Midas Shabbat, and then it's this Das Amishpashit, which brings the Midas towards the Moichin. And then there's the power of Das, which brings Das Mamish, not just Das Amishpashit, but Das Mamish, but that's the Indian of Hargosha V'Hakore, through the continuous being Makusha to the understanding, to these bonds, and that eventually brings, or that discussions and that deep involvement in the feeling and the sensitivity to the Zach, that eventually brings to Av of Yira in Begolui Balei. That's how they call the normal Seder. That's how it is. The Hamshochas HaKoiches and the usage of the Koiches on the part of the Odom to be Megala Midas Shabbalei. He said, however, Bechinas Klippe is Amalek, the Klippe of Amalek, who Klippe neged Moach Hadas. It's a Klippe which is against and had it called over and against the absolute opposite of this Moach Hadas. Shua Heipuk Mipchinas Hadas to Kedusha, then it's the very opposite, that he called the opposite opponent from the Das of Kedusha. Shehu Mechaber B'chinas HaMoichin B'midah. What we saw ultimately, it brings the Moichin into the Midas. V'Amalek Hu Mafrid Bein HaMoichin LaMidas. Shaloi Yispoel B'Liboy Klal Mea is Banan Shabbat. In other words, Amalek, his whole Indian is that Amalek you wish to be Mizboinen, you understand, you want to learn about these inyanim in the Sforim and in Chassidus Beklav. Okay, fair enough, no, but it should stop at a certain point and it shouldn't get down into the heart. In other words, that he separates between the Isboninus and the heart. And the Isboninus just remains a mental activity, as you might say, and the heart remains completely cut off and distant. And that's why it's called Amalek. Yeah, that we saw that Amalek makes the two words Moloch. And we saw that Moloch means to cut off the head of a bird, you know, to pull off the head, literally. Yes, so Amalek. So he said Moloch, that he cuts off as it were, the head of the people. Like it's written in Sefer Vayikra in reference to the korbanos of birds. Or Moloch, the Kohen had to literally put in his fingernail into the throat of the bird and break it and pull off the head literally. Moloch es reishoi mimu orpoi. Shemafrish hareish minagu. What that means quite simply, that the activity of Moloch was to sever the head of the bird from the body. And it was done in the place of the neck. Now the oil was the back of the neck. He didn't slaughter the bird in the back of the neck, but he did it opposite the same spot where the back of the neck is. And that's why mul or poi. In other words, in that area. So he said, at follows if he said, that, my Cain, Klippis Samolek, Koides, he cuts off, or Mafrid, and he separates, as a Reish, Yeshu, Begin Samoichin, Min Hamidas. He cuts off the whole bonaness and the whole usage of the kop, the Reish, which is the Moichin. He cuts it off and keeps it completely severed from the middle. And that's the very opposite of the Koach Hadas in Kedusha. The Koach Hadas in Kedusha is davki to be mamshichen through the Hakora Bagosha in the Isbonas to bring to the development and the Gilui of Emes Amida Shebelev. Amalek says, no, think what you like, but don't ever be mispowerful. Don't ever, in other words, remain cold. Just have, they call it cold usage of your brain, but don't get it anywhere near the heart. And that's the type that he cuts off the head from the midas, or he cuts off the head from the body. So he said that the truth of the matter is that Moach Hadas is Ma'amidas Kol Haguf, meaning it makes possible to stand and be erect and proper the whole of the body. Now, how does that work? So he says, and I told you that the union of Moach Hadas, it brought down in the Sefer Kabbalah, at the top front part of the Moach we got Chochmah and Bina, and then at the back, towards the back of the head, inside the skull bone, you got the Koach Hadas, the rear aspect of the brain, and it comes out connected the forehead, or the lower part of the forehead. It's facing opposite that part, but it's really inside the brain towards the back. That's what he means me'achuda. O mimeno nimshach hachut ashedra, shehu ika kiyum aguf. And from that Moach Hadas is nimshach the shedra. Now shedra means the backbone. Shedra is the spine bone. So what holds your whole body together is your spine bone. And where's that nimshach? Nimshach within your fandas. Omega, that's like a moshel, it's like an indication that the whole building of the Odom is alidei hadas. Okay, now where are we? Shehuika kiyum aguf. The shidra, the backbone, is the main kiyum of the whole body. Okay, now guf. What is the body? Haim b'chinas hamitzvahs. We said already in the Nimshal that we're learning from all these Mashalim that the union of the Eivorim and the body, well, that was we saw was the Ramat Pikudim, the 248 commandments or orders. They are the Ramak Eivorim of the king. They are the Abishas Kaviyochel Eivorim. V'shasor loisase is a shasor gidim. In other words, the Kaviyochel, we bring out the Abishas and we reveal the Abishas limbs and his gidim. V'ika kiyumam, and that which keeps them all going and makes them, function in the right way. Hu adas. Yes, in of the Nimshal, shalidei zeh noiladim midas avava yira amitias. But then he gives forth and bears out, and he saw ava yira, a genuine sort of like we saw amitias, not just temporary dimyanis like we saw in Tanya, but genuine ava yira, ava mokir ramach, ukanao. Kozer barikas, we had all this for arichas. So Kuntas in the Nimshal, we're like saying that we're sort of being ma'arv of the two things together slightly. And we're saying that in the Nimshal, Koach Hadas is machaber, the body together, meaning the mitzvahs. It's what makes the mitzvahs join together. Because if you have das, then you have avayira, then you do the mitzvahs b'shleimus. Of Malik, what he wants to do is to sever the two altogether. V'amolik hu ha'hefech mizeh, because he is umolok es reishoi. He cuts off the head. Now, well, you might say, well, maybe this just happened, It didn't just happen. It was a deliberate attempt on his part. It was like we said in the previous lesson, that Amalek is bedavke. His Indian is not just, if he gets a chance, he'll do it. But his Indian is davke. He works in a way that you will be completely cold and different when it comes to midas, even though you may know things, even though you may know them. But you're bedavke, not to be mispoiled. In other words, that you're quite, you're quite clear in yourself that you're not going to be mispoiled. You take a learn about these things, but you're not going to be one of these farfumte oivdim, that runs around with Yuras Hashem and Avos Hashem. You'll just be a anyway, you'll just be a culter. You'll be to use the expression, a cult of fish. You'll just be, you'll know what you need to know, but you won't get all verkocht or for Brent, like these really farfuma chassidim do. You sort of know, but you take it easy. Don't get overexcited in this life. You just remain calm. Whatever you can be yetzi, you'll be yetzi, and what next, and just live a calm and indifferent type of life. Oh, but that is bedavke. Not that he just, if he'll do that, if he can, but that's what he works at. That's his whole aim of Amalek, is to bring it to such a situation. And therefore he's called Moloch es Reishai. V'zeu shomer Razal. This is what our sages said, Al Amalek, Yoidea es Rabbeinai u'mechaven limreid boy. That he knows his master, but he deliberately wants to rebel against him. Now, Yodea es Rabbeinai means he knows about the Eibishter, but he deliberately wants to, push away any Gilui Elikus or any reaction, or what he called his pilers, Elikus. And now that explains Maimah Chazal, Amalek is Yodea Shaboni, Machavan Limud Boy. I must admit I'm not quite sure. In Gemara I don't think there's any, in the Medrashim, the usual Medrashim is not there. But there is such an expression in our sages, Yodea Shaboni, Machavan Limud Boy, is used to Gabi Bilam, for example. Bilam, Hashem said to him this and that, but nonetheless he wanted to go, Davke, he wanted to go and curse the Yidden. Therefore he was like, even though he knew what Hashem wanted, he wanted to do the opposite. And so therefore it's brought down in Derech Mitzvah Sefer, the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek says that Bilam and Amalek are basically the same bechina. They are very closely connected, Bilam and Amalek. Therefore, that Maimah Chazal, I think, is written by Gabi Bilam. Since Bilam and Amalek are connected, therefore Chassidus quotes it also by Gabi Amalek. And so he knows as Rabbeinai, nonetheless, Mechaven Limrei, the Milchemes Amalek hoya miyad acha Yitzias Mitzrayim. That the war of Amalek was very soon after the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim. Is there something open here? I can feel a cold air coming in. That's why I started sneezing. Over here.
I don't know where the remote control is.
Huh?
I don't know where the remote control is. The remote control. I don't know where it is.
It's not working.
I don't know where it is.
I understand. Well, that's okay. I don't mind it not being on, but not with a window open on the back of my neck. I couldn't figure why I was. I started to feel as if I was getting a chill. Amalek, the war of Amalek was Davke after Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. What did that involve? Sharo, he saw all the miracles and the wondrous signs of going out of Egypt and of Kriyas Yamsuf. Shuinin Gilui Lakus, that's Mamish, the Gilui of the Eibishter in the world. He wasn't affected by that at all, Amalek. And nonetheless he went out Dafki to make war against it, even though he knew that the Eibishter was with him and there was all this Gilui Lakus in the world through Yidden. What does that mean? Raw Gilui Lakus. Not just that he understands about the Eibishter, he saw it like all the other peoples did. Nonetheless, Raw Gilui Lakus umechaven limroid, and he davke wants to defy Elakus, meaning that everything he does is davke. It's not that there could be a problem with Amalek. There is, and he worked davke to blot out the emotional effects of any Gilui Lakus. In other words, he doesn't find that there wasn't any Elakus. He just says, don't become affected by it, man. Don't become despoiled. Just, as it were, go ahead and ignore it. So, and he's not like the other people, Shinis Batlu from Kriyas Yamsuf, they all became bottled. We say every day in davening, Shomu Amim Yirgozun. The people heard and they became all upset and all, how do you call it in Yiddish, they became all stirred up and they became literally disturbed and angered. Not angered, but like, stirred up. Chil, ochas, yeshvei paloshes, fear and pachat, chil, grabbed hold of the yeshvei paloshes in the other countries. In other words, that we bring down in the Torah, in the Shir Sayam, that this Indian of Milchemes Amalek had a big effect on other people. All the other countries and all the other ummas were affected by it. Not only he wasn't affected by it, but he decided he was going to go out and try and blot out the Yidden, because he doesn't want that anything which brings Gilui Lakus in the world to be free. He wants to go and, as it were, davkir, go against it. So it's like we see that his Indian is not just he cuts off the head and all that, but he does it deliberately. And that's the Lashon Mechavein. He has a kavanah davkir to be moiri. Or ba'avodah, who, and in our service of Hashem, who Hashem is boinen b'sichlei v'gedulas ein sof. Even though he's misboinen in his seichel, in the greatness of the unlimitedness of the Eibishter, v'yodeya sho'er liki hu ha'ikar achayis amachayis ha'olam, and he knows that the divine light, that is the principality of all the life force that is machaya, that gives life to the world. Ubiladei ein shum kiyum u'metzias, like we've said before, that without the Eibishter there's no kiyum of anything, and there can't be any entity or existing state of anything. He won't be affected emotionally by this at all. That he should have love and fear of Hashem in his heart. And he does what he wants. He knows that all that happened. But nonetheless, he said, no, Shalom Alisrael, I'm going to do what I really want. So that's really, it's like chutzpah, and it's grobkeit, which are lamailami, completely beyond reasoning. Now, what does that, where did that come in? So we have to say that since that Maimon Chazal taught us that Amalek Yodea Serboine, and not only just Yodea mitzad understanding, but he saw with his eyes everything that happened when Yidden went out of, and nonetheless he wants to break it down. And the only way you can describe a thing like that is chutzpah, because if a person knows, and he knows be'emes lamite, in other words, it's a type of unorganized rishus. It's an unorganized evilness. So there's no other word to give it than to call it chutzpah. It doesn't have any basis even in the cycle of the liyumas, even in the cycle of the nefesh apam. It doesn't make any sense, such a thing. Therefore he said it's chutzpah and grobkeit, gases, meaning, how they call it, coarseness and gases, in highest possible chutzpah gases, shelamayla mitam v'daz. V'zehu asher kol chol baderech. Well, that's what's written by Amalek. Yeah, he literally caught up with you in a way, but it really means also the union of careers, like Rashi brings down, to cool everything down. Shubchinas HaKriras, that's the union of coldness, or how they call it, kaltkeit in English. Shemakader lebli lehispoil, he cools off, that nobody should be particularly, how they call it, emotionally aroused or impressed. Yeah, mishum shaloi lehispoil mishum dova, not to be aroused or impressed by any union. And meaning not only just in Elikus, but particularly when you just have to be a sort of a smart aleck and a cult of fish. You don't react to anything. And he said, it's not that he's got something enough for himself. He's got a sataiva, and if people will believe in the Eivishter properly, then he will interfere with his hanoah. It's not because of that. Loila hanoah satzmei. Not that his kavanah is for his own pleasure. Kamoya zayin midas rois. Yeah, hamiskabrim chas v'sholem. Yeah, that like we saw earlier, that it can happen that the bad midas get the better of you, chas v'sholem. Yeah, who be deila malish tavis? No, that's because he got tivers, and he wants to fill up his tummy with his tivers, to use the expression. Mashik canal. We mentioned earlier, Mashenkin Klippus Amalek, Kavanosi La Koil Es Ha Koil Chas V'Sholim Alidei Shemakale. He said his Indian is to dig everything up and to root everything out. Alidei, he calms you down. And so we see that the spade which roots up everything is kaltkeit. With the cynical grin, take it easy. Well, that eventually becomes the spade which digs everything out of its place. Yeah. Chas v'sholem atche mekare, alidei shemakare. V'zehu garua yoysa mi'azayin midas rois. That's much worse than the zayin midas rois. Because the zayin midas rois, they mean just falling out of your good state through lack of serving Hashem the proper way. And you fall into time and you become a bit sedate from the right way. But you can always come back. Before until Amalek said, very, very difficult, because he just says, no, take it easy. It's all right, everything's fine. No, just be a cult of fish. And therefore he's very, very, to be feared. Amalek is very, very, very terrible. And he says, because the Shalidation may have the Messiah Midas Rois is Burli Yale. We explained above, Shalidation may have if they can be Ma'ir, and they'll come back to be Mizbain properly. So he's Moichin, Harihu Mahapach is a Midas. He can bring the Midas back to Kedusha. Yeah. Canal, as we mentioned above. Mashenkin Klippus Amalek, Harihu Yodeya HaKoil, he knows everything. And Mikol Mokim HaKliris Benafshei Kol Kach, She'ena Mishpoil Mikol Ze Bechinas Avavir. He won't be mispoiled from anything, even though he knows it all. He knows everything, and he just remains completely indifferent. Even without any avavir, without any even consideration of it, complete karidas. Zehu shuhu mafrid bin amoichin lamidas. That's the shot that we said before, that he cuts off between the moichin and he separates them altogether from the midas. She'eno maniach esais bonanes shebamoyach. He doesn't want these bonanas to get into the heart. saw before, the holding of das. Therefore, he's a klippa keneged das. He's against, and he's what you might call how they call it, the davkinika keneged das. You know, it's a political mice. Therefore, the Friedrich Rebbe brings down in a moment, the Friedrich Rebbe quotes in a moment that what's the difference between the Zion Mitzvot and the Molech? And he said the Zion Mitzvot is a Baal Taiva. Someone who's a Baal Taiva, he goes around the world looking for a good time. How do you say? Let's enjoy ourselves down here. He wants to run around and a Molech is like how they call it. He's one of these people that goes out deliberately trying to interfere that people shouldn't be mispoiled. How do you call it? A cynic and a davki. That's the difference. Whatever he said, a Molech is very different. A Molech is like a philosopher with a shita bedavki of keneged, and the Zion Mitzvah is a Baal Taiva. Master, he runs it. So the difference is that every now and then a Baal Taiva can have a different feeling. He can become aroused, and he can throw away his taivas, and he can say, "Oh yeah." Particularly if he meets the Rebbe brings it, if he meets a Talmud Chacham or a big person like the Rebbe or something like that can sweep him back into kedusha. Or he said, "A Molech, take it easy. He's like a great man, but don't listen to everything you hear. Quieten everything down." That's a very gefällig business. So even though I'm finishing off tonight, we shouldn't finish on that note. We shouldn't on that note. So the only way to really find a Molech is through learning Siddur. If you learn Siddur, you come to know the emes Indian, you don't fall into a Molech sand. And particularly through being Makusha B'Torah. If you have emes Keshem and Moshe Rabbeinu. Should Moshe Rabbeinu hold up his hands when they were making the war against the Molech. Moshe Rabbeinu holds up his hands to protect you against the Molech. That's the Rebbe.
Why did Hashem let that happen?
Why did Hashem let that happen?
Yeah.
The answer, just in simple terms, is that Hashem didn't put you down in this world to have a good time, or when I say to have an easy time. Hashem didn't want that all good things should be just, there to get at, but that everything genuine should have a opposite power against it, and that you should have to fight and struggle with it. Siddur teaches that we weren't meant to have just peaches and cream deal in this world. And we weren't meant to just sit on the couch and light up a cigar, But we were meant to struggle. And if we put even an Amalek in the world, that's it. You got to. In other words, that like we see, that Das is the center of everything. We saw Das is the key to all good things. There has to be a thing naked Das. That just says no way. There's not going to be any connection between the brain and the heart. In other words, that there always has to be an opposite, as it were, which we have to overcome. Hashem wants it that way. Hashem wants that everything should come dafki through a struggle and an effort and a beating the opposite. That's the way he wanted it. Good. Okay, guys.